Hi, Kimberly.
Hi, Francisco. How are you doing?
Doing good. So I forgot my earpiece today. Um, so I don't know if you can hear in the background the music that my parents are playing at their house.
I can't. No.
Okay, all right. Well, then maybe I'll play some music of my own. That
Okay.
way, that way we can all enjoy.
Sounds good.
All right, what should I play with? Oh, I know. I'm gonna start with this. While we wait. Okay. Hi, folks. Thanks for joining. We're just getting started. I'm waiting for more folks to join. Um, in the meantime, I'll play some music, if that's okay with folks. folks. Thank you for joining and humoring me with my music. Appreciate that. My name is Francisco. I'm the Executive Director for Housing Now. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, okay, cool, wonderful. So I see a good group of us on the call. Want to make sure we are cognizant of everybody's time. I wanted to set aside this time just to see if there were any questions. Well, I wanted to go over information because I haven't had a chance to do a one-on-one onboarding with everybody that has joined the coalition, and this was an opportunity to bring us all together and do that for everybody at the same time. I really should be doing these on a quarterly basis, so I apologize if it's been a while since you all joined. And then there's a few of you that just joined today, and this really worked out well. So why don't we just go around the call and have everybody introduce themselves? I know you all have put it in the chat, but if, which I'm gonna save for posterity's sake and for our notes, but if I could have you all just introduce each other, your name and organization and pronoun to each other. I've got on my right, Kimberly. Would you mind starting us off?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Kimberly Fuentes. I work for California League of United Latin American Citizens, and I'm the Policy and Communications Director. I've been with them for 3 years now, and I'm glad to be a part of the team. Thank you.
Wonderful. And Kimberly, are you based in Sacramento or where are you based out of?
Los Angeles.
Okay, you're in LA. Great. And can I call on Donna next?
Hi all, I'm Donna Hare Price, she, her. I'm in San Luis Obispo, California. I have a couple of roles that allows me to navigate housing, the housing work with Housing Now in Francisco. Through the SLO County Democratic Party, I'm chair of the Community Action Committee, and then also I am chair of the Rent and Mortgage Relief or San Luis Obispo County. And involved with Bend the Arc nationally, working on housing too. So thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Donna. Appreciate it. I was telling Sarah before we got started that I forgot my earplugs myself, so my earphones. So I hope you all don't hear the background music that my parents are playing. But I'll turn it over to Susie.
Hi there, I'm Susie Dershowitz. I'm the housing policy attorney at Legal Aid of Sonoma County. Really excited to be part of Housing Now. Within Legal Aid of Sonoma County, I'm advocating for state and local tenant protections and greater access to affordable housing. So great to meet you all.
Thank you, Susie. Appreciate it. Viviana.
Hi, everyone. I'm Viviana. I'm policy analyst for Unidos US California policy team. And we're happy to join the coalition very recently. I also just joined Unidos almost 3 months, so very new. And I'm currently in the Bay Area, but our team will be based in Sacramento. So my
Wonderful.
counterpart Jose is there. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Can I ask Hector to go next?
Hola a todos, Hector Malvido with the Ensuring Opportunity Campaign in Contra Costa County. I'm the Policy Advocacy and Community Engagement Manager there. And I guess I've been a part of Housing Now since I started back in May, but I haven't had a chance to jump on this. I think everything's been kind of a roller coaster since with AB 1436 and all this other stuff. But happy to be here and get to know everyone. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Hector. Really appreciate it. Sarah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the campaign manager for the Tenderloin Housing Clinic. This is actually only my second week at the job. So I'm super excited to be here. I actually only joined the coalition this morning. So yeah, happy to meet you all.
Great timing. Thank you so much, Sarah. Appreciate it. And we have Maribel on the line.
Hi, everyone. How's everybody doing? Glad to be here. The Executive Director of Inland Equity Partnership. So work on some other state level work with HHS Network. Yeah, glad to be here. Pronouns she and her. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maribel. So as you all can see, we have a diverse diverse coalition from partners from throughout the state. Just from you all, we've got, you know, folks in San Bernardino and Riverside counties, all the way up to Sonoma, and obviously Contra Costa and in between, and then some statewide, state level coalition partners. So let me start by asking, how many of you are new to housing policy work? Can I see a thumbs up or just folks chiming in? Okay, we've got a couple. I'm somewhat new to housing policy. Just so that you all know a little bit about my background. I started off as a community organizer right out of college. But after a few years, I started doing LGBT organizing or LGBT work. And so I was actually with a organization that does impact litigation for many years around LGBT issues. So it's like the ACLU, but around LGBT issues. And it's only in the middle of 2018 that I came back to more of community, organizing work. And my first job in that was as for a statewide group called ACE, which is one of the founding members of Housing Now, and was also one of the staff, helped provide staffing for Housing Now. And so I was their housing justice campaign director for all of 2019 and that part of 2018. At that moment, we were deep into trying to win a proposition called Prop 10, which was a proposition that would have repealed a current state law. One of the things that has been part of my education around housing is just how big of a hole we're in terms of, I'm sure this comes as no surprise to you all, in terms of the equity issues with regards to housing. You all know of the various historical racist policies that have shown up in our housing policy in California and across the nation. I would just say, for those of us that are new to housing, we're still working our way out of that. And there are many things that are still in our laws and on the books that are, effectively, or, if not explicitly racist, then their outcomes are racist, and are unjust, and that we're trying to undo. And so that was sort of new for me. One of the ways that housing advocates are now trying to sort of think about all the different things that we need. Just to summarize it for some of us that might be new to this, is trying to think about 3 different buckets of work at least. So one is protections or tenant protections, right? Protections for mostly tenants. Homeowners have a lot more protections than tenants do, and landlords obviously even more because of the power imbalance, but obviously making sure that there are protections there. And like I said, tenants have very few protections in law. We're winning more year after year, but there is still a gap there. The second bucket of work that we need is what they call preservation. How do we make sure that we are actively preserving the affordable housing that we have right now, and that it's not getting demolished, or that it's not being, going away because maybe it's no longer affordable housing and it's now just full what they call market rate. And then the third thing was production. How do we produce the housing that we need at the right levels, meaning for the right income levels, for the communities that need it the most? And so that is mostly housing for low and moderate income communities. That when you look at the housing that has gotten built in California in the last 20, 30 years, that's the type of housing that that never gets built, that doesn't get built as much as we need in comparison to the need that we have. I'm going to stop there just so that see if there comes up and folks have any particular questions about that, or if anybody wants to share in general. So I'm not just all talking to y'all. Anything folks wanted to share about that, or how it resonates, or thoughts just for some of us that are new to this?
It's interesting to see how the pandemic, how we were doing with housing before the pandemic and how that's just exacerbated a lot of the issues that we're looking at right now when we're seeing looming evictions come aboard. And so we really want to focus on the ways that we can help our membership and know their own rights when it comes to tenant protections. So that's why we have hopped on to this call, and super grateful for that, the wrap up of everything. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kimberly. That's a really good point. Anybody else?
I have a question, and it really is a question. Here in San Luis Obispo County, some of us who are, really looking at the protection side are in direct contradiction or not aligned with our YIMBY folks that are focused on production and here really supporting developers and stuff. So can you give me like a Reader's Digest of why I don't understand why that would happen? Because we're working on the same stuff, in my opinion.
Those are good questions. And I'm wondering if anybody else has some thoughts. Just to riff off what Kimberly and both Donna brought to us, there's going to be a lot more here as we all engage with each other about ways to learn about all this stuff. So I know of another community group that like to add two different P's to this puzzle, right? So I said protections, production, and preservation. There's a group called Bar High, which is the coalition of public health officers from the Bay Area. And they're very much focused on fighting for health equity, and fighting against, for those social determinants of health. And they like to add in their analysis power and place. So power, I think is important because as I was talking about, when we're thinking about, tenants versus homeowners versus landlords, not everybody is engaging with the same amount of power as other people, right? And, Susie is on, she can tell us, when folks go to eviction court, it's a different outcome if you have an attorney versus if you don't have an attorney, right? So, that's something for us to think about. And the other thing I would say about power is about the story we tell ourselves, the consensus that has been built, the political conventions or the political, assumptions that we all come to this work with. And one of those is, that the American dream is the single family home, that, that property rights are real essential, really a part of who we are, our liberties as Americans. So there's a lot to unpack there. And I'm getting to your question, Donna, as well. And then, so finally, the place piece that I was also mentioning is, we know things are different in different places, right? The housing market is not the same in Los Angeles as it is in San Luis Obispo, as it is in, San Francisco, right? So I think it's important for us to also keep that in mind. Donna mentioned a group that is somewhat recent to housing issues. In the last 10 years, you've had a group that is trying to organize themselves because there is a political gap or a political vacuum of folks that are calling themselves YIMBYs, right? You all probably have heard of NIMBYs, not in my backyard. So YIMBYs are folks that are saying, yes, we want housing, we need housing, and we want it in our backyard, right? Then, Donna, you're also referencing when we're thinking about the power versus the protection versus the preservation, different constituencies might prioritize those three in different ways, right? It might be dependent upon your place, where you're at, or some other assessment. And I would love to hear what other folks have to say about that. But I think one of the challenges that between folks that say I'm a YIMBY versus folks that are saying I'm for housing, but I want to prioritize low-income community members is about the type of housing that gets built, right? Some folks say we need housing, and all housing is better than no housing. Some of us would agree with that, and others folks are saying yes, but since we only have a limited amount of space, we should prioritize or preference housing for low-income people first versus housing at market rate. And the last thing I would say just about that is that right now, and this is again about the narrative and the political conventions that are out there, we don't have, right now we used to have a state dedicated fund every year for affordable housing. They used to call it redevelopment. And it was monies that was given to local communities to build affordable housing and other types of community development. And that completely has gone away. And so there we do obviously have so we have some, programs for affordable housing, but it's very complicated. And so the majority of housing that gets built is built by the market, meaning by for-profit developers. And so I think there's this question for YIMBYs about how much do they partner with for-profit developers versus nonprofit developers, and how do we all as a community decide what gets built on the limited amount of land that we're trying to build for housing? That's one of the challenges that's my Reader's Digest version, and it was longer. It's probably not a Reader's Digest, so I apologize for that. What does this bring up for others? And then we'll move on a little bit to more about our coalition and stuff. I'm wondering, Maribel, you put in the chat this dynamic about different communities being differently situated, right?
Yeah, the political landscape, right? Sometimes it would require incremental kind of approach. I think to me, I don't have an issue with the incremental, approach, as long as it gets to where we need to go. And also, it's there are certain efforts that if you do this or you do that, it could damage or undermine your long-term goal. Like, some of us support single payer, and we feel like if we do certain things that are for profit, that's not incrementalism. So I use that as an example. We do health and housing. We identify health and housing as the two primary drivers of poverty. I really appreciate, Francisco, you sharing about the power and how we are so split. We don't have like a lobbying group united to do advocacy. Even we're split, even with the low income, kind of affordable or housing advocacy, we're split. I was surprised because, we shared with you the Homely Place to Be, and some opposition from an organization that, you would think, okay, they'll be supportive. And now it makes you wonder if they're going to lobby if we get that bill going, and so, because they oppose emergency shelter. And I think that every region is so different of what they need, that there's, especially with COVID, there's things that we just need now. And it's not to say that we're going to prevent us from doing other things. Because I do feel that the investments that we put in short term, it sometimes does take equal as much time as doing the stable housing or other things. But sometimes with COVID, I think sometimes you got to figure out the strategy. And just because if you belong to a state organization or national organization, and this is just the way they think things, it might not work here locally. And that's the thing too. It's a good thing to have a combination of state and national groups in this work, but sometimes we also need the local groups and to be loud and say, no, this is what we want. So anyways, yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you, Maribel. Appreciate it. Others thoughts on the quick landscape that we were sharing with? Anything that comes up for y'all?
Yeah, I would just say I really appreciate that question. And I think, you know, it's always instructive to see like kind of where the different lines get drawn on housing. It's such a contentious political issue. And I think, you know, I love the idea of including power and place into every analysis. And one thing I think of with place too is like, I guess preservation, production, and protections doesn't really capture like what does it mean for folks to be displaced from their neighborhood. But yeah, back to your question, and there could be another P, which is profit, right? So it's like so much of our housing issues are really bound up with who's profiting from, you know, renting and who's profiting from building and selling housing. So it's like, you know, issues that impact renters are often not on the top of the list of people working on housing for home ownership. And so one thing I'm really excited about with this coalition is kind of like marrying these issues together, because I think it's really powerful to have people working on tenant protection issues, also working on like bigger picture affordable housing policy. And it's a little bit wonkier, like it's a little bit less accessible, but it's really important. And like, I think we do need to bring just like more, we have to do more educating on like how do all these issues intersect, so we can bring more people with us and focus on like the people who are most impacted, both by like not being able to purchase a home, but also by people who, you know, maybe will never be able to purchase a home. How do we want to like stabilize them in their community as renters without having to always focus on like home ownership as like the final end goal too.
Yeah. Thank you, Susie. Really appreciate those thoughts. That's a lot of what you said resonates with me. Anybody else wanted to add anything?
I guess just to kind of go off of that, just for context, like I came to housing organizing from the Bay Area when I was a student. I just graduated, so that wasn't like that far away, but so we had a lot of times in organizing where we had to work with YIMBYs, and we also had to work with pro-tenant voices, because students are just like a very interesting group when it comes to housing policy. And I think the one thing that I learned moving forward is that it's not like a mutually exclusive term. Like you can be a YIMBY and also be pro-tenant. And I think moving forward, it's really important if we want to get like major bold policy passed for us to bring everyone under our coalition and make sure that we're pushing together, because it has been so hard to get a lot of these things passed in the past few years, that it's just more important than ever that we build a coalition just like this one that is intersectional, has all these groups involved, because, you know, like people's lives are at stake, and in the middle of the pandemic, it is worse than ever. So even though like there are those issues there are tensions there, at the end of the day, like we're kind of basically on the same page for most things. So I'm excited to see where that goes in this upcoming cycle. Yeah.
Appreciate that. I will say to Maribel's point about there being different silos within the housing advocacy community, that's definitely there. That's definitely right. I mean, obviously we've referenced or lifted up one, but you know, sometimes, and there's also not always, with the silos comes the lack of communication. So sometimes tenant advocates don't always talk to affordable housing providers, don't always talk to homeless advocates per se. So I agree. I feel like our goal with Housing Now would be to provide that bridge, and because with the silos, what they do is they provide opportunity for expertise and to go deeper, right? And I think that's important. So we don't want to get rid of that expertise, but we want to create bridges between those expertises, right? So that we are moving towards bigger solutions, systemic solutions, right? That we can all get behind. And then I would say, in addition, is how do we bring in folks that, you know, their housing is not the primary issue that they work on. You know, maybe it's education, maybe it's criminal justice reform, maybe it's just, you know, climate issues, right? And so Housing Now, we're hoping Housing Now is that platform to both bridge those silos and then also be an entree for groups that are starting to look at this issue for their communities, but haven't engaged with it in the past. I kind of feel like I think we understand that housing is a very intersectional issue, but I think what happens with, you know, with things that are so intersectional is that they can become almost invisible, right? Because they affect everything. And so, you know, they can fall through the cracks. That issue falls through the cracks for all of us. If it's so, we take it for granted, right? And so I think we're trying to kind of bring it back and say it is intersectional and highlight it and lift it up the way it affects all of us. So let me turn to actually sharing my screen because I wanted to briefly. I think I shared, well, this is my Spotify, but that's different. Here, wanted to just talk about, can I ask how many of you joined our Housing Now retreat? Did anybody make it to that? Okay, I know a few of you did, a couple of folks did.
I was able to go, but only 2 parts of it. I had some other things I had to do that day.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. I know it's a full day and it can be difficult. So let me just talk, you know, all right. I am going to tell you just a little bit about Housing Now. So we've already, I think, talked about the why Housing Now, right? That's all the issues we've already been talking about right now. But this is a little bit about the what, you know. So we're a coalition of over 100 groups. I think we're getting close to 150 organizations throughout the state, local, regional, state, and some national groups. And the goal is to build power to make housing affordable and combat the displacement crisis. I will say the displacement crisis that is mostly affecting communities of color. That's the idea and the purpose. Let me see if I can present. Oh, all right. So the other thing about, I shared our structure and decision-making document with everybody on here. That is what we're using to help provide the sort of like the bylaws, the infrastructure for our coalition. One of the things that is central to this coalition is that all the groups that are participating are completely in support of the coalition sort of being led by tenants, being led by the folks that are most affected by these issues, right? And that there's a recognition that different communities are being impacted, you know, the disproportionate impact of working class communities of color around the housing inequities that we currently have. And then we organize year in and year out. We started in 2017. The goal is, again, we're focused on policy, focused on campaigning, and bringing our coalition partners to seeing what can we win this year, what can we move forward. And we do have some multi-year policy goals that we're trying to use as our North Stars to get there. This is our coordinating committee. And you can see that we have some tenant union groups, some community building groups, some unions, some labor unions, as well as some policy groups or think tanks, sort of helping to help lead. Currently, I am the only staff person for Housing Now. So all the work that you all see is really done by you all, by the coalition partners. And some coalition partners obviously do more based on their capacity as well than others. But these are the groups that have committed to sort of helping the coalition lead in terms of our our strategy and direction and support. We meet once a month as a coordinating committee. Okay. These were some of the highlights that we went over during our retreat. So I'll share them with you all so you all can see in practice what this looks like. So this year we had to retool our advocacy agenda to reflect COVID, right? And once we did that, AB 1436, which was a bill that was to prevent COVID evictions, sort of rose to the top for our coalition partners. We were at the end of the legislative session, we were able to get over 160 organizations endorsing AB 1436. We had over thousands of constituency calls into legislators. We did over 64 in-district lobby visits, or they're all Zoom, so they really virtual lobby visits, period. We did social distant action. So some of our coalition partners do direct action as part of their efforts. And that also added to the earned media, right? Not just the policies themselves, but the actions in different parts of the state. And we did those throughout the state. So from Merced County to Los Angeles to San Diego. And, it's really about keeping up the drumbeat of support for our efforts. And we had over 1,500 letters sent to the legislators and the governor on AB 1436. And when it came down to negotiating something around COVID evictions with the governor and the other legislators there, what we had built up really put us in a place to be able to push back and try to win as strong protections as we could. What I can tell you, what they started off offering in terms of negotiation was very far off from where we ended up being able to win. And we think that that's partly due to, the strength of the campaign we were able to build and the growing support of folks like you all to Housing Now. Let me stop there just before I continue with a few more sections that I wanted to share with you and see if there's any questions to what I've shared so far. Nope. You all good? So if y'all have been, I want to make sure, I think, Sarah, I will add you to our Housing Now email list because that's how I'm updating everybody about, our, various campaign, the work that the coalition partners are doing. But you all should know that where we left off this year with COVID evictions was that we were able to pass a law or a law got passed that protects tenants up until the end of January. So we actually just a week and a half ago relaunched our campaign because we know we need to pass something new in January before the current protections that we have go away. That law that we currently have in place is called AB 3088. And I can put in the chat, let me see if I can do this as well. We do have we did a recording of a webinar to let people know what we currently have in place. If you want more information on that, let me put it in the chat. So this is a webinar that we did maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago to update folks about what we have now and kind of really give you the update to what we need to be fighting for next, right? We know we need to pass something in January because that only gives us a month, and because we need that law to take effect immediately, that means that that bill needs to pass the legislature with 2/3 of legislators voting in support. both in the Senate and the Assembly. So we think that we're probably not going to get everything we are fighting for. In particular, we feel we need some type of resolution around debt relief for tenants that have accrued all this debt in this time period, as well as support for small landlords and nonprofit housing providers. Another factor there is that many of us are waiting to see if we will get additional federal funds, right? So the current strategy is we are going to fight for a bill that gets us past January, and that is AB 15. And both of these bills have already been introduced. I will put it in the chat if you all, we are working on a fact sheet to share with everybody. This is, but just so you have it, this is where you can find information about AB 15. And then we have another bill, AB 16, that we hope will be the place where we can, it's a spot bill right now, meaning it will need to get amended to be clearer and have more provisions. But this is other bill is where we hope to address the long-term impact needs that we have around COVID, the debt relief for tenants and landlords alike and stuff. So just briefly, just so you all know, this kind of sharing of information is what Housing Now was set up to do, like be a clearinghouse of this information, because it can be hard for some groups to know what's going on in the Capitol, especially if they're local advocates. And, it's hard to keep track. Oh, is there a bill? Is there, who's supporting it? Who is against it? Who should I put pressure on? And so the idea is that obviously Housing Now can be a clearinghouse on housing policy issues for our folks fighting for low-income communities, for our coalition partners. It's the clearinghouse, and then it's the coordination, right, on the campaign side and stuff. Okay, any other, I won't get super into the weeds on our decision-making structure, since we just went over that in our, at the end of every year, we try to do a year-end retreat and a process to be able to figure out what is our priorities for next year. And so if you look at the structure and decision-making document, it spells out exactly how we do that. And it's several calls, it's the retreat, and it's also then a vote. Right now, we're sort of in the middle. We just had the retreat. We had our coordinating committee take the information from the retreat, and we have one final step where we're going to ask our coalition partners to vote up or down on the various proposals that came out of the retreat and the calls that we've had so far. Any questions about that? Okay, so let me, I mentioned earlier that we do have some multi-year goals that we're using as sort of North Stars. So policy goals. So these are some of our policy goals that we know are going to take, that are multi-year campaigns. And so sharing those with you all so that you all know where many of our groups have coalesced around. So one is expanding rent control and expanding what they call just cause eviction laws. So again, these are protections for renters, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, are, we can be doing so much better on those. They're not at where they need to be. And we do have laws on the books that we think are detrimental. One of those is this law called the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act. One of our policy goals is to get rid of that. Another policy goals is we want to, when we're thinking about the system, Susie mentioned P as a profit as another issue. So right now we have a housing system that really only goes to the highest bidder. Every housing, except for affordable housing, every other type of housing goes to the highest bidder. And we wonder, does that make sense for as housing as a human need that people need? One of the ways that housing gets more expensive is because we don't have many regulations on the speculation behind that housing, right? And so we want to figure out how do we create a system that takes housing into more of as a need and less as just open it up to market forces completely. The other things is how do we strengthen the laws that really ensure the health and safety, improve health and safety of the housing that we do have. You can think about it that as also part of the preservation part of the work, especially this comes into play around habitability as a big major issue, and in particular in some of the areas that maybe there is and have less scarcity, meaning there is more housing, but the conditions or the quality of the housing is a lot more compromised or dilapidated is a bigger issue. And then finally, how do we really invest in our values? If we think that everybody should have an affordable home, that's going to require the state to prioritize that. And so where's the revenue for that going to come, and how do we fight for it that it gets prioritized? And then here is our theory of change, how we think we're going to do this by bringing us all together, right? So we're fighting for large scale and those long-term solutions. And we really think it's important that we engage our coalition partners, especially the ones that are, like I said, fighting at the local level. And I think some of you mentioned this, like Maribel talked about how the same policy might not play out the same in a different place. So we think it's important that there is engagement at the local level, and that we also, the need around local engagement is also about really meeting people where they're at and building a base, right? This is about building political power and to be able to win these things, because if it was easy to win them, we would have already won them, right? So we think we're going to win that by increasing our base and then expanding the alliances that we have with and amongst our groups and in other areas. So it's not just urban areas, right? We, as a part of the work, as I mentioned about the housing and the speculation, we want to lift up that system doesn't work. And in particular around corporate landlords, this is a dynamic that happened after the financial crisis, where so many people lost their homes, they were foreclosed on, and they were bought up by corporations who now are increasingly going into the housing market to be the landlords. So going away from the mom and pop landlords and towards, greater corporate control. And we think that is harmful. We obviously want to fight against the housing discrimination and the displacement that happens there. And then I mentioned earlier as well, the need to change the stories that we tell ourselves about housing. And that is the question around the narrative. And so the idea is that our campaigns break that down for folks about how each, the different things that we're fighting for are unjust and how the solution is possible. Okay. And then just briefly for folks, as we were thinking about what things to prioritize for 2021, here's some of the criteria that our coalition was using. How many people does this policy impact? And who does it impact most, right? What is the impact? And that's something for us to think about. How much of a lift is it? How much of a lift is it to win that? What is the viability of that particular, is it possible for us to win that policy that we want? Is there a consensus behind it amongst the various different coalition partners? And then will it help build our movement? We talked a little bit about maybe some of these policies are building blocks, and they can be, incremental, but they help build up towards lasting change that will get us towards, bigger and bigger systems change that we need. So does it help build our movement, right? Susie put in the chat. Do you want to say what you put in the chat, Susie?
Sure, just building on that bullet point about the housing crisis also being really severe in less urban parts of the state. And this was just a great report that came out, I think this week or last week, about the eviction crisis in the Central Valley being like one of the worst places in the state of California for evictions. And yeah, just kind of, I think it's really important to change the narrative from like, oh, this is just a problem in San Francisco, or this is just a problem in like expensive coastal cities. And we see the same thing in Sonoma County, where it's like our housing crisis is really severe, but it's like a more rural suburban county. So just want to throw that report out there.
Wonderful, thank you so much. That reminds me just to share a little bit more about the infrastructure we have. I mean, I talked about our coordinating committee. We do have some working groups, established standing working groups, and some standing calls. So I feel like I shared a document called Areas of Work with you all. That was my attempt to sort of break down the different places that different coalition partners can contribute. Right now, we've got a policy working group that meets, I'll put this in the chat, that means a third Thursday of the month, every month at 3 p.m. And everybody gets invited to these. So the idea is obviously we're hoping that we do work, but we also, I feel like one of the benefits of Housing Now is its ability to meet you all where you're at and help introduce you to policy housing advocacy. Some folks might be new to advocacy in general, period, right? And so I'm trying to help meet folks where they're at. And so we open up these spaces to everybody so everybody can listen and learn about the various different items. So right now we've got that policy working group, like I said, the third Thursday of the month at 3 p.m. I can make sure everybody's invited to that if you all would like to join. We have an organizing working group, and that is mostly organized or dependent upon the campaign. And so now we relaunched our campaign. So we have reinstituted that working group. And I think we're meeting on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. I think in January, we will be meeting once a week in January of that group, and also providing folks an update on the campaign and how it's going, given that we only have 30 days to pass something, right? This past week, we had a breakout rooms during that call where we broke out into communications and coalition building, but we do have some coalition partners that, their expertise or what they can provide is a communication staff person. So we do try to bring those folks together so that they can, provide for the coalition their expertise around, placing op-eds or putting together talking points or doing videos or doing all the different communications work that we need. One group that we've had on and off, and currently we don't have it very active, is a research group. I would say that is something that I feel like is a gap. And like I said, we've had it in the past off and on, and right now it's sort of on hiatus. So if you all have any support or can provide any support on that or interest, let me know, and I can see if anybody else is interested, and we can set up that call to talk about what are our research needs for our current campaigns that we've got going on, right? And so through these various working groups is how we're moving our campaigns forward. Some of you have been, already participating in, the work that we did around AB 1436. Some of you are brand new. Let me stop there and see if there's any questions about how to get involved, how to get engaged, and in general, period.
I have a question about the lobby meetings for the current campaign. I think you said you were working on a talking points document right now, but I was about to start reaching out to our local assembly member or state assembly members and senators for Sonoma County to start those conversations, and just wanted to be sure that I was, sharing the same messaging that everyone in the coalition is sharing. But I mean, the way I was thinking about it was just that folks still can't pay the rent, and we need an extension, and that COVID-19 is, worse now than ever before. And always sharing some of the great research around like how evictions lead to poor public health outcomes. Like we've been relying pretty heavily on that in our local advocacy. So, showing that when eviction moratoriums were lifted across the country, it was followed by more people contracting COVID-19 and having worse health outcomes, like whether not just for those who were evicted, because it leads to doubling up, overcrowding, and moving into congregate settings where it's harder to do social distancing. But I'm of course keen to see if I just want to be on message. So I was just curious.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, not a problem. So I do think, one of the challenges trying to communicate to 150 groups is that we're all at different points in reading our emails. I'm behind myself right now. And then also just, even in an email, it's easy to miss something, right? So I'll forward the last email I sent to everybody. I included this campaign cheat sheet in there. And in that cheat sheet the idea was that it would help in one place have all the different things that we need for this future campaign, for this current campaign. One of them is a place where you can sign up to either adopt a legislator or what we call anchor a legislator. If you know your organization either has strong contacts, strong ties with a particular legislator, and you want to adopt that legislator to say, we will help lead with that legislator, you can do that. Or if you just want to be invited to a lobby visit with that legislator, you can identify your org and put in your contact info for both of those things. The other thing that is also in there, Susie, is a messaging guide. So if you, let me also put that in.
I just pulled it up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries. And we're going to be obviously updating the cheat sheet, and I kind of feel like I want to make it as easier to understand what is what in there. So I'll keep on adding to it and moving things around so it's as user-friendly as possible. But the idea is that hopefully all the resources you need are in there to help be able to make the case and stuff. And
okay, great.
What I need, I think, with our organizing working group is actually doing the follow-up, right? Because sometimes on our call, we say, yeah, I can do that. I can commit to this. And then you get busy throughout the week or whatever. So, it does help to have somebody email you or call you and be like, hey, you said you'd be able to sign up for a lobby visit. Do you know which ones you want to do now? Right? And then just be like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. And I'll put it in the form, or I'll tell you right now and we'll put it in the form for you, right? So I'm going to be doing a lot of follow-up, obviously, in the next few days about all this stuff.
I actually have to hop because I have a 2 o'clock, but thank you so much for putting this on, and it was great to meet all of you.
Thank you so much, Susie. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm just going to see if there's any other final questions, but I think I went over most of what I wanted to touch base on. Any final other questions folks have?
I think just really quickly, I know you mentioned this earlier about setting campaign goals for the next year. And I was just wondering, have all of those already been pitched? Do we get to vote on those later? Just quickly, how does that work?
Yeah, so that, if you look in the decision-making and structure document, the process is laid out there. So what we've already done right now is we've had a few policy working groups and a few full coalition calls. Oh, that's the one thing. We do have full coalition calls where everybody, you know, is invited to join. It's not a specific working group. And those are monthly. Those are the fourth Thursday of the month. Sorry, I'm trying to do two things at the same time. So we have these conversations on those calls, and then we did the retreat. At the retreat, there were several priorities that were pitched amongst the, you know, for the coalition partners, and then folks took a temperature check, sort of what were they gravitating towards. The three that came up from that, I will tell you, one is COVID eviction protections, debt relief, all COVID response stuff, you know. Two, trying to win a funding for affordable housing, like trying to be proactive, trying to win monies for affordable housing from the state. And then third was right to counsel, or funding for legal protections, legal services for tenants facing eviction. So those are the three that rose to the top. Now, our coordinating committee reviewed those and has now recommended that the full coalition vote on those. And that's the part where I was saying that's the next step that we will next do, you know, so.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Any other question? I know sorry for running over. Viviana?
Yeah, just quickly, to join the working groups, we just hop on the calls or email you for the details. No
Yes,
formal signature?
just
Okay.
I'll be lookout. I mean, via the email, I'll let you know about them coming up. I can add you all to the calendar invites, the ones that we have standing. So we'll do that, and then yeah, just hop on.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely, sounds great.
And then I was gonna say, so we'll join the call next week, because I think
Yes.
one of our team members, we're gonna target Sabrina Cervantes. So I know we're working in partnership with a couple other folks. And then when you get a chance, I know I just emailed you right now. We're trying to plan for the January budget action. We really want to be on the face of the governor on the issues of housing.
Okay, wonderful. Absolutely. So right now, our Wednesday call, I think it's like an organizing and communications working group. And we are meeting again next Wednesday, this coming Wednesday at 10 a.m. And I'll be sending an email about that again. Okay, folks, thank you so much. I hope you found this informative, and you know, please feel free to shoot me an email at any point just to ask about how we're doing. And thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you. This was great. Thanks for organizing.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, y'all. Take care.